We're good.
Oh, boy. On this episode of the Gym Life Podcast, got a special guest in the house with me tonight. People know him as Eric the Giant. As you can see, that's pretty obvious why they call him that. He's a friend of mine, and I kind of stumbled across this guy. He is one of the highest-ranked amateur Highland Games athletes in the nation. Hard to believe still an amateur, but we'll talk about that. I've had the pleasure of throwing with him a couple times in a couple different events, more recently this summer, and of course trained with him as well. Welcome, Eric Spence.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Man, it's a pleasure having you. You know, I said from the beginning on this show that my love for the Highland Games would eventually get here. And when we first started, we had a young guy out from Utah that was a real good thrower on one of our first episodes. And since then, of course, I wanted to try to get more acclimated in the sport. But it's a sport that everybody knows and appreciates. But as we were just talking, it's also a sport that can have somewhat of its eccentricities about it that aren't as normal when it comes to being a sport as maybe other sports are, on pathways, on successes, on events, and where you go, what you do, how you do them kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk a lot about that as well. But before we get there, let me talk about your size. You're 3'8", 400 pounds.
3'8", yeah. No, I'm 6'8".
Oh, 6'8". My bad.
I'm 6'8", and I'm roughly about 380 pounds most of the season.
You know, when I first met you, I was invited up to the training group there in Midland, and you know, I'm generally the bigger guy when I go anywhere. And I got out of the truck that morning, and I remember seeing you and Cam, who by no means is a small guy. Cam is a big man himself.
Oh, no, Cam's another big guy in his own right. Cameron Newkirk's a thrower here in Michigan, and I mean, he's 6'3" and probably 270 pounds, if not a little more.
Unbelievable.
He's another bigger guy in his own right. So, yeah, for a lot of guys, you know, you come into, especially if you come out of other sports and into strength sports, you go from being the bigger guy to, no, not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first saw you, I thought to myself, why isn't this guy doing strongman? I mean, you're the size of Thor, for God's sake. I mean, those of you who are watching this video right now, I'm 5'10", 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. You're a giant.
Yeah. I actually went down to the Arnold Classic this past year. I was in the Highland Games down there too, and I actually got a photo with Thor, and we were eye to eye looking at each other. He just kind of got this big smile on his face because all the other people in the line to get a photo with him were, you know, standard height people, your 5'8" type people, 5'10" people, and then he sees me step around the corner. He's just like, yeah.
He saw one of his own, right?
It's just this little smile. I'm just like, nice.
Yeah, get over here, guy, kind of thing. Yeah, that's great. What? I mean, I obviously I got to go to your backstory a little bit because you know, you've been a big. Obviously, you just didn't grow a foot over one summer. You've been a pretty big guy since the get-go. What athletically did you do growing up? When did you find the Highland Games? How did that become a part of your life? Kind of take us back a little bit and kind of come forward with where you're at kind of right now.
Okay. I mean, I was, without a doubt, I was always the big kid growing up. No doubt. I started high school and I was 6'4" and over 300 pounds already as a freshman in high school. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
No.
But, I mean, as far as sports go, from when I was, 6 or 7 years old, I grew up a hockey player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
like Chara.
There's a look for you.
Yeah, right. No, I'm thinking he's the biggest guy in hockey. He'd probably be bigger than him.
No, he's 6'9". He's got about 1 inch,
okay.
But he's more than 100 pounds lighter than me.
Yeah, which I think on skates you'd probably have to be, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah. I dang near grew myself out of that sport real quick.
I'm guessing, yeah.
So I went for 11 years of hockey, playing, I played high school. I played junior JV hockey when I was in 8th grade still. I played varsity as a freshman. I stepped away for that to go to the realm of travel hockey, and I was all over the state doing that stuff. And when I eventually decided to start switching, I went to track and field.
Okay.
So I went to shot put and discus in high school. Those were the two throwers my school had. And then with that came, I was in high school, and everyone was telling me I needed to play football.
I would guess that, yeah.
I tried 1 year of that, and that wasn't happening.
This wasn't your thing. Yeah.
Heck no.
Everybody's going, damn it, Eric. Come on now. Just stand there,
I mean, I played my freshman year, and, I was reasonable. I'd never played before. So, I mean, there's guys on the team who were like, yeah, I played for the school's junior team, and it was, I was in 6th grade when I started. I'm like, it's my freshman year of high school. I've never touched this sport before. We'll see how this goes. And that was okay for someone who had never done it before. They had me at left tackle on offense and defensive nose. So I
Makes
didn't
sense.
really.
Yeah.
I ended up liking the defensive side more when I tried that, but even the overall was just trying to go from hockey to that. I was just not in my wheelhouse.
You know, sadly, when we see giants like yourself, everybody just assumes, at that point, I must be a football
Heck
player.
yeah.
I'm sure you get that all the time. Not only that, you probably get, what pro team do you play for? Because there's not a lot of guys walking around with your stature by any stretch.
Oh no.
But it would be kind of an interesting place to live for a while for a lot of us normal size guys to know what it feels to be 6'8", almost 400 pounds. So yeah, I guess we can all. I'm sure you've been through all the stigmas of it.
Oh yeah, there's definitely been some. I mean, there's a lot of ones where you walk up to just out in the middle of anywhere really, and somebody walks up and you sit there and you go, so what college team did you play for,
Right.
or who you play football for? Absolutely no one.
Yes.
I throw trees for fun. That's what I do.
Right. Let me explain this to you. Yeah. So when did that come about though? The Highland Games. I know your dad. I know your dad. Did your dad get into throwing with you before you? How did that all start for you, the Highland Games? Because you've got history. I mean, you're not only a Highland Games athlete, but you also have what a lot of Highland Games athletes would call a pedigree, or at least like you have family, ties to kind of the old country, if you will, right? You've got your tartan and all that stuff. And can you explain all that to me?
So with the Highland Games, a lot of it is, for a lot of people, they're a Scottish background, Irish background over in that realm. And that's where a lot of people hear about it to start with. And
Right.
I mean, I had heard about it before, but I'd never really done it until after high school. And that still makes me one of the younger athletes to start. I started right after I finished high school. I was 18 when I did my first one up in Gaylord, Michigan. And it all started when my senior year of high school, the football coach, who didn't like me for rather obvious reasons at this point,
Yeah.
he became the throwers coach. And he wasn't my biggest fan, let's put it that way. I asked the head coach if I could look for a track and field coach outside of the school for throws.
Yeah.
I found a coach. He was a 5-year thrower at CMU. He had his degree in exercise science. He had all the numbers for that, and he threw at CMU for shot put and so on. So he threw at CMU for shot put, and I chose to go that realm. Turns out he was a professional in the Highland Games. His name is John Pilling.
There it goes. Yeah.
And he's the guy who got me into the sport. With John Pilling, I mean, he's got the technical aspect. He's not the biggest thrower, but his technique is quite good, and he's got the training of all that time at Central Michigan and that time working in the Highland Games that he's been throwing for a good while. And it got close to my end of my senior year, and he's like, "Hey, try this. Hey, try this." And he's handing me, the Highland Games hammers on occasion.
Not forcing it on you. Just sort of
No.
saying, hey, give it a shot. Let's see what you got. Kind of thing.
Was pretty much
Yeah.
what it went. And it was, that he had indoor weights for distance because he trained at a place that had a couple basketball courts.
Okay.
And the basketball courts were open for use to just about anybody. And he had kind of like a nylon webbing set up with a giant medicine ball in it.
Yeah.
So he had a 30-pound and a 50-pound medicine ball for the weights for distance, which are traditionally 28 and 56 pounds.
Yeah. Pretty good look at it though. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
And he had me try those for the weights for distance, and it was, weights for distance are pretty much shot put.
Right.
Sorry, the stones, correction.
Right.
The stones are pretty much shot put.
Right.
And with that, that came over fairly reasonably. The hammers he had me practice because they had a space out back to try. And
Were you doing a lot of, just to kind of catch up here a little bit and kind of get in I guess you can say in more advanced throwing, spinning in a throw, because more you see a lot of collegiate athletes, more successful guys. I mean, you do it. Were you doing that already in high school? Was he already kind of teaching you those techniques? Was it kind of a part of his programming at the time, or were you kind of just sort of feeling your way through that? Because, to hand somebody like a weight for distance, for instance, I mean, how were you throwing it is what I'm getting at.
with the shot put, which was where in the discus it's a rotation regardless.
Right.
Shot put, it's either the glide or the rotation, and I threw the glide in high school.
Right.
Now I seem to not be able to do that, so I just stand throw the sucker as hard as I can and hope for the best. With that, the weights for distance, he started me off with the one turn which where most people start off.
Yeah.
And there's guys out there who can throw a one turn 80 feet.
But you were kind of doing that with discus anyhow, so it made sense to you a little bit, kind of how to transfer your weight.
It made sense a little bit,
Okay.
yeah. Because I mean, with that, you have to shift your weight for things like discus because you're shifting from one foot to the next to make
Right.
through that rotation.
Right.
So I mean, the throwing was always fun to me, and I always kind of enjoyed that. And, you know, trying different things and getting me more events to throw. I mean, I was in to go try it. I went and I saw him compete at the Elma Highland Festival in 2016, and he introduced me to two guys who were organizing the Gaylord Highland Games 3 weeks later. That night I signed up, and the next day I had to come back to get a kilt because I didn't own one at the time.
Yeah, I know how that feeling is. Yep. I know what it means to forget it too on your first show. Anyhow, story for another day. So you got into these events in large part because your coach sort of groomed you a little bit. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He saw this potentially
he saw it was
good to great
he saw it was worth giving it a shot to. And you know, as soon as he offered up, I was in, because truthfully I wasn't the kind of guy who was at the level who was going to be looking at for, you know, collegiate athletics scholarships or anything like that. And I'm like, I want something to keep doing just to train and have fun.
And you enjoyed it.
And it was a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, right.
So I saw that as an opportunity to just go for it. And so.
Yeah. And how many years ago was this?
2016 was my first contest. Okay. So this is my 7th season now.
7th season.
And I'm a grand total of 24.
24 years old, 7th season. Is that would be sort of now a lot of, like you said, you started at a fairly young age, because in the games and throwing itself, for the Highland Games, that is, generally you see more people entering the sport, in their mid to late 20s, or what would you consider the average age kind of? I know we always hear collegiate throwers tend to transfer over, crossover best. At least I have, talking to the guys and stuff too. So when do we usually see that happen for a lot of guys and girls, of course?
For the collegiate throwers, it's usually the mid-20s where you'll see them come over, because they finished their 4 years or 5 years, depending on how they go about it. And they'll finish that time at their university, wherever it may be. And they'll turn around and they want to keep throwing, to keep competing. So they'll come to us. And in a lot of cases, they'll come and they'll either... It's interesting because there's a little bit different attitude about the Highland Games than most, where it's we want to throw our best, but we want everyone else to throw their best.
Right.
And there's a lot of information sharing between people who are competing against each other in the same group.
Yeah, I've noticed that, yep.
So, some of them I've seen, a couple here and there, very few. It's definitely the minority. They come over and that just feels weird to them, and they just can't get used to it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. They want to be more introverted into the sport, and
they want to just focus and sit there, and they find, that the guy who's beating you is trying to help you, and they're like, well, he's trying to mess with me. No.
Right.
We just want everyone to have a good time throwing.
That's interesting, because my background, of course, is largely strongman, and it's the same in strongman as well. And that's why I think there's this cool sort of brotherhood between Highland Games and strongman. A lot of Highland Games, a lot of strongman athletes, I shouldn't say a fair amount of them do cross over because of that same brotherhood you get in the Highland Games, where there's sharing of information. Of course, a lot of us that compete, like myself, it's recreational. But when we're talking about where you're at now, you're at the point where you're legitimately looking at this as doing this professionally. And of course, we'll talk about what that means more later on in the show. But did your coming up and through the sport in your early 20s put you in a place kind of to be there before a lot of guys generally get there? Or did your training sort of take you to that place right away where the eyes were on you a little bit and you kind of knew, okay, this guy's got something here? I mean, I know you're a pretty humble guy, but where was it at that point that guys are saying, okay, Eric, listen, we really got to look at your training a little more seriously now, because you've got an opportunity to do this, this, and this. Does it interest you, and how do you want to go about doing it?
See, that's where I think, in my case, I think I stand a little bit out as an oddball, especially at the realm I'm at, because I do not have a coach for throwing or for lifting. I barely have a lifting program, other than I know which body parts I want to do on which day. And when it comes to, nutrition, I don't have a nutrition plan. I do not have a nutritionist. There are a lot of guys out there who have, they'll have a guy doing, their lifting and coaching for things like that. And there's other guys out there who can do that. It's just, it's taken me 7 years to do so, when you see a lot of guys come out of, say, the collegiate realm, and they go from amateur to professional in the span of 3 or 4 years.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's a quicker transition maybe in some cases.
In some cases, yeah. But, I mean, starting so young, it's given me time.
Gotcha.
In comparison to a lot of these guys who, they start out, in some cases they haven't done a lot of other throwing, and they decide they want to do the Highland Games because they see it at a festival, or they see it at the Renaissance Festival or Alma in the Highland festivals, and they're like, I want to try that.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. So they start talking to somebody, and, you know, we have people around that if you can get in contact, they'll put you in, you know, they'll tell you, oh, well, so-and-so is relatively close to you, reach out to them, and they can get you started. But, you know, in some cases, that's not the point. Like, I had John Pilling that I found out of sheer luck.
Yeah.
There's people that, you know, I talk to at festivals who are like, I want to try this. Okay, where do you live? Do you live down in Detroit? Okay, well, there's a couple guys who live down there who usually are pretty good at helping out the new guys. So ask him, see if he's okay, and I'll give you his information if you want, if he's up for it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know.
So there's a couple different routes is what you're saying ultimately to get there.
Yeah.
The route that you took was a little less of the grooming route, a little more of just the appreciation kind of for the sport and what you were doing and sort of what you were being a part of. And I think that would kind of save off burnout for a lot of guys too, right? Because you've had an opportunity to kind of stay in your own lane. You weren't at a young age. I mean, I know you're a young guy, but even prior to that, you weren't being force-fed this stuff. You were able to appreciate the pageantry and the fun of it. To know now that, okay, I'm at that point where I'm okay with taking it more seriously now.
Yeah, and it was probably over. I mean, for me, it was never something that I at one point sat down and I said, yeah, I want to go professional. I kind of just took it as a challenge to see how good I could get. And, you know, for me, that meant taking my videos and watching professional videos of the guys who are good at certain events. And, you know, I'll take mine in slow motion and I'll find theirs on YouTube or whatever, and I'll watch it as close as I can. And I'll do that. And you'll find, you know, certain guys, you know, they set up different. They take their first rotation in the weight different, or, you know, they start their hammers from a static start versus a dynamic start and things like that, whether they swing into it or pull it from the ground, things like that. And, you know, trying 15 different things to figure out which one seems to work best for me.
Because there's more than one way to skin a cat in the sport. We know that.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe in that way, then you've had an opportunity really to sort of, like you said, kind of get the full spectrum of these different techniques and kind of what works best. Because at some point, it just works, and you're putting the hammer out there 115 feet, and people are going, okay, now we're talking. Now, because when we've talked, and we've had many conversations about this in the past, it's those marks that generally start getting the heads turning and saying, okay, we know where I have to be to the next level. Mm-hmm. We know that, you know, a 100-foot plus hammer throw, you know, what is it?
Heavy hammer.
Heavy hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's be clear about that. A lot of guys can't get it 80 feet. We know at that point we're in the conversation. So that that maturization kind of happens naturally as well, whether your technique is right, wrong, or indifferent. Mm-hmm. If you've got the ability, you simply have the ability, and I think that's the beauty of the sport to some degree as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the idea of if you have the ability, you have the ability. You'll see, because this sport, we only really have one weight class. If you're under 200, you are considered a lightweight in the men's division. I don't know I think it's 150 for the women's. I don't know for that for sure. But if you're above that, you're in the opens. And it's then determined by how good your throwing numbers are. So there's C and novice for those who are starting out. B is kind of the middle ground, and then A is where individuals sit who've been doing it a while, or their numbers are good enough.
But the numbers generally dictate that, though.
Yes, the numbers will dictate that more than anything.
Right.
So with that, you can move forward and start chasing stuff. There was guys, because I kind of stand out from a crowd a little more than most, there was guys in my first year who were like, yeah, if you want to do this, you could go professional at some point.
Right.
And I remember that there was a guy in Indianapolis when I went down there for my first year. It was my last games my first year. And there's a guy walking by, and literally I was walking past. He's like, so are you going to keep doing this? Yeah. He's like, you can turn pro one day if you really want to. I'm like, okay, sure. And that was my first year. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, as the years go by, he turned out to be pretty right.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's talent when you see it. It doesn't hurt that your release points and leverage points are.
Oh, they help.
They help. Yeah. Listen, you can drop the Braemar stone in a lot of cases, and you're throwing further than a lot of guys are if you just lean forward. But that certainly does help. But you're right. I thought one of the biggest misconceptions in the sport of Highland Games is size. Because size outside of maybe some height, right, means very little. And a perfect example of that, of course, is one guy that we throw with, Jason Cherry, is in my class. And that son of a gun gets under my skin so much because he's half my size. But his technique trumps me every fucking time.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I love Jason because, I mean, there's times where he can throw with the lightweights if he wants.
Yeah.
Because he rides that line between, 200 and under 200.
Yep.
So whether he wants to throw as a Masters because he's over 40 or he wants to throw as a lightweight, he can do that depending on some games. And he's got the technique and he's got the speed that he can throw fantastically.
Yes, it's just a great thing to see.
Yeah, it's something else to see. And another example of that, of a guy who's not nearly as big as his competitors but can throw incredibly well, is Greg Pilling. So John got me into the games. His brother Greg was a discus thrower at Central Michigan.
Okay.
And there's times where I've seen him compete in the lightweight division, and there's times where I've seen him compete in the A class with guys like me. And he'll make me have to throw a good day to make sure I can win because he's got the technique and he's got the power.
Yeah.
I mean, he may be, a foot shorter than me and the weight of my leg, but
yeah,
he's just got so much skill.
It
it's
puts the
incredible.
pressure on, doesn't it? It's like when I compete with Jason, and more recently at, I didn't make it all the way through Shepherd because of my bicep, but up in St. Ignace, for example, we were having a fun go at it back and forth. But it's interesting, the deception there, because him and I could walk out on that field together and you could be a spectator and you go, oh, that big guy's just going to kill everybody. And then they see Jason out throwing me and they're like, it's almost, it keeps you moving, doesn't it? Because you can't let that happen because it's just not in our DNA, right? We're the big guys. We're supposed to dominate everybody. Do you ever get that feeling when you're out there that if you're competing against like these classes that you're a part of now, these upper A classes, that you're going against these guys with that technique like you just mentioned, but there's that ego that comes into play like, fuck, no, I'm not letting this guy beat me. I am way bigger than him. I have to outthrow him.
You see, that was kind of shut right out of my brain real quick.
Was it? Okay.
Well, I mean, I started with John Pilling.
Yeah.
Now, John's not a small guy. He's about 6'2", and he's about 240 pounds or so, 250 pounds. I've got him by 100 pounds in body weight and 6 inches in size. So most people would say I would win.
Right.
But from day one, he was the guy teaching me, and I couldn't catch the guy. And it's taken me 6-7 years to get close.
Right.
I mean, he's still a pro. I'm still in the amateur division 7 years into this. So that kind of went out the window real quick.
Yeah, I suppose with that type of upbringing through the sport, you're being pretty humble. Yeah, you're not. Yeah.
It made my first couple of years really amusing.
Yeah.
Because especially my very first games in Gaylord, because they all kind of met out at one of the bars for a local night out, and there was 30 plus guys or so at this event, and it was all the throwers and the judges and everything, and it was hilarious because I walked in the door and they're like, "Who are you? How did you find this sport? And what group are you in?" As soon as I figured out I wasn't their group, they're like, "Oh, thank God,
yeah,
thank goodness."
Right.
I don't
There's
have
that,
I don't
that
have
sense of relief, right? Yeah.
And then as soon as they figured out, John was the guy training me, they're like, "And you got trained by a guy in the pro divisions." Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, right.
And, I still worked with John for my first couple of years there, and, it kept me honest.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing I did, and without a doubt, I mean, since then he's changed jobs, and he doesn't do physical training as much as personal training as much anymore. So, I mean, I haven't really been working with him hardly at all, and I've been training with, other throwers like Cameron and the guys over that you've seen. So it's gone from, working with one guy fairly consistently to with whoever I can get to go throw with me, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, I guess it kind of is fun, isn't it? I mean, you kind of become more of the guy that's lending to the idea of making guys better now. I mean, that's got to be a nice sort of transition for you a little bit, simply because you put so much into the sport as an athlete, just to have those moments now where you can sit back and take a guy like me, for instance, because you've given me a lot of great advice, to be able to be that guy now too, because it seems like that's sort of the nature of the sport, right? Give and give back.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. There's a lot of guys out there that, throughout, especially my first couple of years, a lot of the guys in the Masters divisions here in Michigan that, my first couple of years, I was willing to shut up and listen.
Yeah.
So, with that, there's a lot of guys here in Michigan who've been fantastic throwers over the years and still are. And with that, they have the knowledge because they've been competing in the sport longer than I've been alive, some of them.
Yeah.
So those first couple of years when they're like, okay, how about you try this? And how about you try this? And maybe shift your feet different ways and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was willing to be quiet and listen because I knew full well that, he may not be my size, but he can probably still beat me.
It's funny. I remember being on the field in Alma when I was over by the Sheaf and we were doing that, and it was a good atmosphere over there. You had Ivor over there, and I think Dale was there, and Steve Blevin, of course, and a slew of other guys, and of course all the guys that I competed in the Masters. And you kind of saw me, and I came over and said, "You said, how you doing?" I said, "Pretty good." He says, "How much advice you getting over there?" Because you knew every one of those guys were telling me something different. But it was kind of it was a fun moment because I knew exactly what you were saying to me because of that give back moment. I was just like you. I was just keeping my mouth shut the whole time, trying to take it all in. It was like trying to learn like algebra in one day. But in any case, that was a moment that I shared with you that I thought, he knows exactly what I'm going through right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
with a lot of that. There's so much where if you ask a question, you may get 6 answers, but there's a bunch of things you can try then.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had plenty of things, and it was Sheaf, so I had, of course, I'd miss one, then make one. I have 3 other attempts to get the next height, and so I had plenty of opportunity to put a lot of that good advice to work. And to this day, I don't still think I figured it out, but anyhow, I've got a few different ways to get through the event now if I need to. So let's talk about that for a minute. I think and this is going to be cool because I got a lot of listeners out there that aren't all Highland Games experts and know a little bit to nothing about it, and it's fun for me to introduce a new sport. I know we've all seen it. Everybody talks about wearing a kilt. Everybody wants to wear a kilt. For those of you who don't want to wear a kilt out there, quit being a pussy, wear a kilt. There are 9 events in Highland Games.
Yes.
Let me make sure that I'm correct on everything. We have the Braemar stone. Then we have the stone put, which would be the light stone, right, for distance.
Yeah, considered the open stone.
Open stone, okay. A heavy hammer and light hammer.
Yes.
We have the heavyweight for distance, lightweight for distance. Caber.
Yes.
Sheaf.
Yep.
And weight over bar.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's 9 events, and to think about all those events as an athlete, to try to compare that to any other sport, which I was trying to do a little bit compared to strongman. Again, it's probably its closest brother. It is a grueling day. It is a grueling day to get through those events. That first event was, I wasn't even feeling my body at the end. It was just difficult. It's hard to imagine, but until you do it, how did it take you to adjust to that? And I get it. You're young. You were training a lot. But generally when you train, you're not throwing all 9 events. You're not really running through a game day. How did you adapt to that?
With that, the first few times, I was completely ignorant to the recovery side of weightlifting as well because I didn't start consistently lifting until well after I started the games because all I did was track and field.
Yeah.
So after that first few games, I was walking around sore for a couple days after the fact for sure. And you get a lot of stuff in, your shoulder and your lats because it's very dominant in both of those.
Right.
You compare it to strongman. The other thing I try to put it as is it's a decathlon, but everything is throwing.
Yeah, even better. Yep.
So it's one of the things that all the events tie together, and it's just everything is throwing, and we just make it heavier.
Yeah, and to take nothing for granted, a 56-pound weight for distance over bar, we have an event in strongman now. Well, it's been there for a while. Of course, you've probably seen it, the keg over bar. But more recently, it's really converted to sandbag now, the handle with the sandbag. Yes. A recent show last week was one where the lightweights were doing 35 pounds for height, which I appreciated, of course, and referenced it weight over bar.
Exactly.
And then the heavyweights were doing 15-foot height, heaviest bag they can possibly get over.
Yes.
And what do you think the heaviest bag that the strongmen got over? These are 105 guys, so they'd be 230 to 50 pound guys. They went over 15 feet. What do you think the heaviest bag was?
See, I might be a little off this because
it's okay. Nobody's going to hate you for it.
I guess somewhere in the 60-pound range.
No, it wasn't. It was 55 pounds. 50 or 55 pounds, which again, it falls into that weight over bar, right? At 56 pounds, which surprised me a little bit because listen, that's a good throw, but mind you, they were using 2 hands.
Yes.
So
Highland Games only allows for one.
Only allows for one. This is some kudos to the Highland Games guys out there because it really, again, is a lot to do with technique. And I mentioned on my show that I did as a pregame to that event that get with the Highland Games guy. All you guys in strongman right now that are doing this bag for height, bag for weight or height, because that's where this technique transfers. A lot of times we try to replicate this kind of stuff either throwing or in the gym to find these movements. I kind of wanted to point that out because you were sort of saying about how you train for these events. And I wanted to get back to that a little bit because you taught me a few things as I was preparing for some of my shows about the snatch, the clean and snatch, or actually hanging cleans. You said, do these hanging cleans, they're going to go a long ways for you. How did you design your programming and what things in your programming really work well for you for Highland Games?
With things for Highland Games, the Olympic lifts are big in my eyes.
Okay.
Things like, clean and jerk, snatch, power cleans, hang cleans, things like that will transfer fairly well because, one, they force explosiveness, which in throwing is huge. And especially things like snatch where you're taught to pull through the top, all the way through your head, all the way through over, that helps with things like caber and weight over bar.
Right. So now we're talking a little bit of that now with the strong guy man listening to you say, okay, so keep going.
Things like power cleans, you have to get used to that heavier weight, which you see, and then because you use that heavier weight, it forces your hips to get stronger. And lead with your hips is something that's fairly big in throwing.
Sure.
If you ask, a lot of the technicians, throwing with your hip first and then follow with your upper body is a huge deal because it helps create that full body acceleration.
Right.
So those are huge. And then, like you'll see with a lot of shot put throwers, things like push press, because it increases that explosiveness off your shoulder, translates over to things like stones. So I like to do a fair number of, when I can, and I'm increasing it more as I keep going, is single leg things. So things like single leg squats, the split squats, and things of that nature.
So unilateral type stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you do that in large part because of that transfer of weight. It's particularly in your spins and things as well, right? Okay.
Well, even things like, a lot of guys, one of the best ones was referenced to me by a guy who I threw against at the Arnold this year. He does some coaching work, and he likes the Highland Games guys because they're not afraid to get on one foot. And he says one of the big things that strongman guys need, that strongman guys do that would help them, is yoke.
Yeah.
Because you have to go because you're walking with it.
Right.
So things like yoke and frame, you have to get used to getting on one foot.
Yeah.
And it may be a shuffle at first, but you got to get used to it, and it'll help build up. One, it'll help build up your legs. Two, it'll help build up your core.
Yeah. Which
are things you need to stabilize when you're swinging a 56-pound weight.
True. Yeah. There's a lot of correlation there for sure.
So, I like to use a fair number of, strongman events. Like, I'll use single arm dumbbell overhead.
Okay.
For, I don't have the big monster ones at my gym, but they do have one that goes up to 150 pounds. So it's, it's a solid one for 99% of the people. The big strongman guys out there, if you see the big pros, they're doing 200 pounds plus.
Yeah, easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
but yours is for more functional anyhow. Because when we're talking about the difference between training for the type of power that you're trying to sort of to translate into your performance is way different in a lot of areas because you need it to be more functional. A perfect example of that is I'm a pretty good presser, an overhead presser. In all actuality, it hinders my Highland Games when it comes to my throwing because I get too bulked up and my shoulders get in the way of my positioning on the stone and also on the hammer. It's harder for me to come around. So these are things that you have to worry about, or I shouldn't say worry about, but you're consciously saying, okay, how am I going to develop from this?
Yeah, it's one of the things you have to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah.
With that, you need the ability to, it's the challenge of strength and mobility.
Right.
Because you have to be able to get into those positions that give you a chance to put leverage on a weight, but you need to be strong enough to actually apply it.
Right.
And it's insane to see some of these guys who, they get to the point where they can, push press 400 plus pounds and they're still spinning like lightning for the weights for distance to launch them out there. And
that's incredible, really. Yeah.
You're looking at that going, I need to figure out how to do that.
Right. Yeah, but it certainly is an enigma to some degree. Yeah, without that overdevelopment and having that speed and explosiveness, that dynamic energy, and be able to translate through quickness and speed and still being very, very strong. In a way, we're talking about the same sport here. because much of what strongman's all about today is that exact same kind of methodology when it comes to programming. So we're not that far off. It's just you're going to use certain things in the training to be a better thrower again, because that's what we're talking about. We're not overhead pressing necessarily. We're not running with a yoke, but all these implements have their own way of sort of making you a better Highland guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with me, my issue is, I need to build more explosiveness is one of the biggest things I see in my issue. That, and I need to fix a lot of my form work like most athletes. There's always technique things you can improve. It doesn't matter whether you're the top guy on the planet or not. There's always form I need to improve, but my one is I need to be faster when it comes to exerting that in a second.
Yeah.
And, picking up things like, different modifications of box jumps and different modifications of, banded work, so that when I make that applied force I have to push through, is things I'm trying to use to just keep improving that over time.
Well, it's certainly not an easy thing for a guy to do when he's 6'8", 400 pounds. I mean, there's a reason linebackers don't run or linemen aren't running backs. Yeah. So and not telling you anything you don't already know. So there is this superpower that you have, being as strong and as big as you are, but there's also these areas that some are better in because they don't have what you have. So there's this meeting point in the middle, and I guess that's where it really makes the sport more on a level playing field, because you can take a guy as big as you are and then put him against, or let's just say me, for instance, because we referenced Jason Cherry earlier today or earlier on the show, and take a guy like him who really beats me with that speed and that dynamic exertion.
Yeah.
It's not strength, obviously. Nothing against you, Jason. It's not strength. But that's what we're talking about here. So now if you can find a way to keep developing that, you'll be untouchable.
Yeah. With stuff like this, one of the guys who's a really, really high-end amateur right now is Nick Atson. And he is he's not, your 6'6" type guy. He's probably 6'1", 6'2" range. And I think he's under 250, and the numbers he's putting up are absolutely fantastic. And
still a big guy by all rights. He's
a big guy by 90% of the planet standards. But when you get into the realm of sports that contain guys who are
a majority of them are bigger,
6'3", 6'4", and plus, he's not the biggest guy in the field, but he's incredibly fast and very explosive.
Yeah.
I had the option to compete against him at the Arnold Classic in 2020, and to watch a guy like that move was nuts. Pretty fantastic, yeah. Well, it's great. It's like a big physics problem, isn't it?
Highland Games is a lot of math when you think about. I'm not a physics guy. I flunked out of physics, but I'm assuming right now, I know you're a pretty smart guy. You're thinking of all these X's and O's when you're putting together this programming to some degree.
There's a few things in there that I definitely look at, but to be fair, math was never my biggest thing. It always took me a little extra time. I can figure it out. It just takes me a lot longer.
Right.
My brother's the math guy, which is hilarious because my brother's 8 inches shorter than
I'm just picturing like this chart, and you're drawing these arrows and circles, and how do I make this faster to get this rotation, to create this inertia and all this crazy stuff. But it kind of is that. I know that's a geeky way to sort of look at it, but when you see guys throw as well as you do, you start going, okay, the X's and O's kind of have to, again, you just can't muscle everything.
No, you can't.
Yeah. There's technique involved in this in a big way.
Yeah, and that's where, for an individual like myself, I need to break that down in some events more than others. Specifically in my case, my stones.
Yeah.
My Braemar is respectable. It's just shy of the 40-foot mark, but that's the heavier one. My open stone is, 40, consistently about the 47 mark right now. I've thrown 47. I've thrown as well as 49 this year. And my problem with that is I'm still stand throwing that.
Yeah, I noticed that at the last show. There's not a lot of movement there for you at all.
With the stones, there isn't any.
And you used the slide step, though, when you threw, so what's the problem?
I don't know.
You just can't get it back.
I need to break that down and figure it out.
Yeah. Because that little slide step, we both know it. It's going to add a couple feet to the throw.
Oh, yeah, it should. The rule of thumb I've heard for forever, it should add 3 to 5 feet.
Yeah.
Which would put me in a fairly competitive contention at a lot of contests.
Right.
Especially at the higher end, if I can add that much.
Yeah.
I need to figure out how to do that.
Well, let's talk about that higher end, because that's kind of where you're at. You don't have a choice at this point. If you want to compete to where you're going, you sort of got to figure this out. or it's just going to be one of those events you hope you can get away with not too big of a ass beating in it that you can keep in contention. I guess is a good way to put it.
It eventually turns into damage control at that point.
Right, exactly. I feel that in a few events, sadly, but if you start with the right 4 events, I'm in first place halfway through, then I shit the bed. But you won the. I want to make this point because this is pretty cool. A lot of us know the Arnold Classic. You won the Arnold Classic last year.
I won the Arnold Classic this year.
This year, okay, this year.
2022.
2022, right. 2022 won the Arnold Classic, which is a rather big amateur show nationally.
Yeah, for us, we had guys we had 2 out of Michigan, which was a big deal out for us. There was guys from, down in Texas. There was guys from Alabama. There was guys from, up in Maine, out on the East Coast. There was guys coming in from, all over the place. For the U.S., it's one of those shows you have to apply to get into, and you send them all your numbers because they're indoors, they don't allow you to throw certain events. So they only take into account who's best at the events they're throwing.
Oh, gotcha.
So they don't throw hammers because they're indoors. They're not going to give us that space, and you may hit the ceiling. They're not going to throw lightweight for the same reason, and they only throw one of the stones. They only throw open.
Okay.
They don't throw Braemar.
Gotcha.
So you send in all of your numbers that they're going to throw, and then they take the numbers out of who's
See, I didn't know that, and I like that then. So essentially what they're saying is, well, what we kind of talked about pre-show was just like any other sort of invite-type competition, it's being based on your current numbers and what you're doing in order to get to there to compete at that higher or that next level. In this case, at that amateur level, the Arnold would be considered one of those shows.
Yeah, it's one of the more recognized shows, especially. It's definitely one of the more recognized shows outside of the Highland Games because of the festival it's attached to.
Right.
Because the Arnold Classic is a big deal in the fitness community and the strength community in general. I mean, it's a show that, you can get your name out there for that one because it's just that noticeable.
Was that win for you that moment? Would you call it that moment? I mean, I get it, right? There's going to be a lot of moments.
Yeah.
But right now, was it that moment where the guys were looking at you, Eric, going, okay, this guy's getting close to, and we're going to talk about that next because it's confusing as all get up. At the same time, it's worth noting. Was it that moment for you? And I know you're, again, not looking for ego here, just wondering if other guys kind of said, okay, who's this guy now? Or did they kind of already know you were coming up through the ranks?
There's a few that already knew I was coming up because, I mean, it's not the first time I've competed at the Arnold Classic.
Okay. So
I was in the competition in 2020 when there was no spectators and no trade show. It was at that one where it was only the contest.
Yeah. Right.
And I took third in that one.
Okay. So
because of that, there's a few who recognize the name now, and there's a few who I've seen, and they've heard about me, and then this one a little bit more, and it still grows. And then there's fairly other shows I've done with. I was in the Dublin Irish Festival in 2020 as well, and that was a fairly big one for us.
I would guess, yeah.
It's run by the same people who run the Arnold, and it's one of the qualifying shows for the Arnold Classic.
Yeah.
So you do get a fair number of fairly high-level athletes who come in from all over the place because if you win that, because that's the way they ran it for a while, if you win that, you're dang near guaranteed a spot at the Arnold if you want it.
Right.
So
so not an easy show to get into is what I'm getting at.
No, I took seventh at that one.
Yeah.
Year.
And that was in Europe, so.
No, Dublin, Ohio.
Dublin, Ohio. Okay, I was going to say because wait a minute, you get over there. I mean, that's got to be big time. I mean, you're talking you're the pro league of the pro leagues when you're throwing in Europe. I imagine, right?
Dublin, Ohio's the north side of Columbus.
Yeah. Okay, well, that sure took the fire out of that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
But listen. So I want to get onto this because I think this is fascinating. I find this pretty interesting. Really, a pro status in Highland Games isn't what a lot of folks out there think. We know in strongman, well, that's still up in the air, debatable in strongman. But if you could technically win your pro status, in bodybuilding you win your pro status, and powerlifting, again, somewhat debatable, but we know when you're at a certain place you win your pro status. In Highland Games, it's a bit of pedigree, it's a bit of contest history, it's a bit of who you know. It's not so much. I don't want to make this too political. And then it's a bit of, well, it's not. It's quite frankly a majority of what you're capable of doing or not doing. And then you've got this collective, let's call it the Illuminati of Highland Games, all right, that decide whether or not you're worthy of stepping up into the next level, which I find fascinating and pretty cool to some degree. But we talked about that. Is it the right or wrong thing? But
to a point, it's a lot on the athletic administrators, the ADs.
Okay.
As to whether or not you end up turning pro, and it's a lot based on it's a lot of your past contests and what you're capable of. Those are the big ones in that field. And then it's who you can reach out to and who you can squeeze a spot in. Because a lot of times if you're, you know, in my case, there's a few here in Michigan that I'd like to try and get into in the future here. And I'm already trying to talk to the administrators and say, you know, if you have an extra spot next year, these are my numbers. This is how I feel I can do. Right now, you know, I've won the Arnold Classic this year. I'm putting up numbers that put me in the top 10 amateurs in North America. If you have a spot next year, I'd like it.
Yeah.
And, you know, they'll look at that with, you know, the pros they get, you know, the pros that they invite next year and the pros that ask to get in already and see if I would be a competitive athlete there. And if they feel I will be, then I'll get my shot. After that, it's how many I can find.
Well, it's you know, and I respect that, and I respect it in large part because there's so much pride that's put into the quality of athlete that competes against one another at these events. It sounds like these promoters are like, listen, I want you to be able to compete, because that puts on a better show for one.
Exactly.
But we also want to make sure that we have the best competing against the best. And to take a guy that's not quite ready, you're throwing him to the wolves because these pros are legit. There's more disparity between an amateur and a pro in the Highland Games than I've seen in any other sport by far. I'm talking about, I mean, almost to God, honest to goodness, even the mainstream sports. There's more disparity between a high-ranked amateur and a pro in Highland Games. Would you agree?
I mean, there's a big jump there. I mean, I don't follow the difference between the pros and amateurs in a lot of sports. So, I mean, I just focused on what I do and I try to get good at it. But with that, I mean, there's a lot of difference there. And a big part of that is consistency. With the pros, they will consistently throw big numbers.
Right. Okay.
And
it's not just a good day. They're you know where they're going to be.
They're going to be solid.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, you know, because they've trained it. And a lot of these guys in the professionals, you know, there's a fair number of them that used to throw in college that you get out of there and you've had training at a very high level athletics.
Right.
And then you take this and you take that guy and he goes, well, I want to keep training. So he just keeps going and found something more that he can do. And they just keep going. And there's some of these guys that, you know, I threw 5 years in college and I'm in my 6th year in the Highland Games. And that's a decade of hard, heavy throwing that they've had to really, really get good at throwing things.
Yeah, it is such a slow progression. I mean, I think I want to get this point across, and a lot of strength athletes can relate. You're not putting 30 feet on your hammer by accident. No. You're not putting 3 foot on your weight over bar by accident. I mean, you know, I had a great day. I threw my PR is 18 feet. It used to be 15. Yeah, no. It just doesn't work like that.
No, in for example, weight over bar. I mean, it's 56 pounds, one hand over your head.
Yeah,
as high as you can get it. And a lot of times you'll get, you know, you're throwing a PB in an event and it's 6 inches.
6 inches, yeah, right.
And you know,
just watch a grass grow.
Exactly,
yeah.
But you'll get 6 inches, maybe a foot in a year. And you know, there's guys who, you know, they run up the score and they'll get to a point and then they just stop and they'll stay there for years.
Yeah.
When I started out, it wasn't until, you know, my first year, I think I got to 12. I was at 13 for, you know, my next 2-3 years. Then I got 14. Then I got 14, 6. Then I got 15, and now I can get 16. And it's been, you know, for 4 years there, I was stuck at 13.
I feel like I've been stuck there for 4 years too, and it's been 3 contests. I hear you. Yeah, if you're in a hurry, this is the wrong sport for you. I mean, you're just not. You have to be patient.
Yeah, and that's just one event. You got 8 others to train for.
Right, right. No, it's something that I've recognized a bit and appreciated. I'm sure, right? There's always those stories, those one-offs. Are there guys and gals that have come into the sport of Highland Games that you know of that just come in one year and the next year you're like, holy hell, look at where they're at today? Like, I'm sure it doesn't happen often, but I'm sure it's happened, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with some of them, it's because they've done a couple here and there, and then, you know, they choose to stop training track and field full time, and they go
generally it's
Games.
One of those athletes. Let's be clear about that. One of the
usually it's the guys who's come out of, you know, there's guys in the Highland Games now who were at the Olympic trials for hammer throw.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, okay.
So one of the guys who, I mean, I watched him throw at the Olympic trials for hammer throw is Colin Dunbar. And he was at the U.S. Olympic trials for this past Olympics, and he throws in the Highland Games now, and the guy is fantastic at especially his hammers.
Yeah.
And, you know, you see the guy throw, and you're just like, okay, yeah, he's good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen him. I noticed he did a couple in the past, and you know, but his main focus was track and field because he was trying to qualify for the Olympics.
Sure,
I mean, there is a big goal there, and that takes a lot of time. So with that, you know, he's you know, I don't know for sure, but I think he stepped back from that a little bit, and he's, you know, done some Highland Games, and you just see some of those numbers, you're like, yeah, you're nuts. You're good.
Are there different? And I think I know the answer to this, but there are also, just like in amateur ranks, there's different levels of pro rank too, right? Are there? I thought there were.
As far as I know, and to my knowledge, if you're professional, you're a professional.
You're a professional. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there may be certain
but the
events.
invites may be more limited to even the higher professional type guys,
Yes.
right? Okay.
So it especially depends on where you're competing. So, you know, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is the national championships for the professionals, usually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not getting in that one on your first year as a pro, probably.
Gotcha. Again, pedigree goes a long ways.
Well, you got to prove
a resume, I should say.
Yeah, resume goes a long way because, you know, if you get in and you're, you know, middle of the pack in the pro leagues, you're probably not going to get that one every time.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain ones that are just tougher to get into. And, I mean, to be perfectly fair, I don't know yet because I haven't tried yet.
Yeah, right.
It's going to take me a little bit to get into a few of them, and I know. So
it's another set of challenges, right?
Exactly.
You've made it through the amateurs the way you have, and now you're to the point where, okay, and let's talk about that real quick. You're at that point now. I mean, Eric, you're that guy on the bubble. Everybody's talking about it, certainly within our community. You're there. We're just trying to find that moment now to sort of make it official. How does that look for you? If you can, and I get it, you're humble, you want to make sure you say the right things, but where are you in your mind? Where do you kind of see that taking place? When is that moment for you, do you think? If everything worked out according to Hoyle.
If I got to pick, it'd be Elma next year.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. One, it's one of the bigger shows in Michigan that starts off the year, and it would still allow me to go back and compete at the Arnold one last time because I had a heck of a lot of fun doing that.
Sure, why not?
So
right?
I'd love to go back and do that one more time down in March and use that to get, you know, some practice and get my numbers going for seeing where I fall and what I need to really work on, and then I could make that jump at Elma.
And how does that look when you say make the jump at Elma? You would then inquire for the invite, right?
I would ask,
Okay.
you know, the AD at Elma and those involved with it if I can make the pro class. And, you know, I'd have to reach out to them as soon as I could,
Hey,
which, I mean...
And nice to know people, right? You're from Michigan. That's like you were telling me before. If this was Texas, it may not be the case, but at least you know there are those opportunities then for athletes within that sort of realm of kind of who you know, what you know,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I
'Cause
mean,
people have seen you compete.
I let the AD this year know that, you know, if he's got a spot, I'd like to have it.
Got it.
And then, you know, it's time, and then when it comes around next year, I'll reach out and say, you know, do I have a spot there as a pro, or am I throwing there with you at the amateurs again this year?
And
you
dominating every event like you did last year. I mean, let's just move on here. Can we? Can we?
I didn't.
I think you won all 9 events, didn't you?
I did not.
No, you didn't. That's right. You got beat by your.
8.
What's that?
I got 8 of. I got 6 of 7 because they.
And it was Cameron that took you on the sheaf, right?
Cameron took me on the sheaf,
Yeah.
which is an event I usually beat him in.
I know it rubbed you wrong that
we
day. I
we
saw that.
swapped because usually I beat him in usually he beats me in weight over bar and I beat him in weight over bar that day. So we swapped on those 2, but I still got all but 1.
I found that to be interesting as I got to know you guys a little bit over the summer. Was you guys have this great training chemistry when you get a chance to train together.
Mm-hmm.
There's a brotherhood between you two. And there's also quite a competition between you two.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, and which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, Cameron's essentially, he's on the path as well. He's that guy that's going to be there right where you're at, if not, you know, sooner than later, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I see him if he keeps improving. There's no doubt that if he wants to, he can keep going down that road. But you know, that's up to him if he wants to go down that road.
Yeah, it's the big what if, right? I mean, we look at that in all these strength sports and say, well, if that guy would have decided he wanted to do it, he could have been this way or that way. And we look at that in strongman and powerlifting as well. you know, again, it's personal preference. A lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort. I know he's a new dad too, and you know that could take away. And of course, you're 24 years old bachelor, right? I'm guessing. Yeah, no kids, no. Yeah, the job that keeps the food in your belly, and I know you got a mom and dad that support the hell out.
I'm still a student.
Are you? Okay.
I'm studying for an MBA in marketing.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's right. You're the master's guy, kind of a student. Do we still call that a student? Yeah, I guess we do, don't we? Hey, listen, I love your dad. You know, your dad and I talk at every show. He's probably your number one fan. There's no doubt about it. Not even probably. I know your dad is so proud of you and what you're doing in the sport. And your dad's just such a good trooper. He comes into these events just going, fuck, I guess I'll do it today. And he goes, well, he always says to me, Joe, you're going to beat somebody today. That's so great. Come on in. Yeah, but how's that relationship with you and your dad?
So that one's been interesting, especially because I mean he was there with my first one, and you know all that. Most of my family has been around for most of my contests here in Michigan, and with him, you know, he's been watching since forever, and he's got his fair share of health challenges and things like that. I was in my 5th year before he did his first contest.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, good for him.
So, and he did 1 that year. He did 1 the next. He's done 2 this year. So we'll see. I mean, I'd love to see him keep doing it because every day, I mean, yeah, he's tired and beat up for the next couple of days, which, you know, is something that pretty much most of us face with this. But I mean, wears a full brace on his knee because he's had issues with that. He's got, you know, issues
it takes a toll on you.
With his hands, he's got issues with a lot of things. So, but you know, every time I see him out there, he's like, yeah, I'm not throwing the way I want to. I'm last. It's like, yeah, but you're throwing against, you know, guys who've been to the Masters World Championship. So, you know, temper that a little bit. I'm awesome and ecstatic that you're out here trying to throw and have some fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he definitely does it. I know he loves the pageantry and camaraderie of it because I talk to him the whole time I'm there. But I know you. I don't have to tell you this. When you're out there throwing, he's just talking about his son throwing. You know, he's less concerned about what he's doing next, and he's more concerned about, you know, what Eric did over there on this hammer. And so I appreciate that. That's an awesome camaraderie that you guys have. And it's interesting because in our little community here, I've been blessed to be surrounded by so many great Highland Games athletes. I mean, geez, Pete's Dale last weekend or 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, up at Shepherd, he
set
the Master 60 world record
60
for the
and over world record. I saw two of those now, and Emily did the sheaf and Elma.
Elma, yep.
Yeah. So we've got some really tremendous athletes around us, and I've been saying it since I started the show. And in my bubble, just about in every lifting sport, we're just saturated with really talented athletes here within 300 miles of us, which is really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is Emily and her husband Matt used to live here in Michigan, so they still come to some of the games up here. Yeah, I think they're in West Virginia now. So,
and she was a thrower previously, right? I understand that. Are a lot of women throwers previous collegiate athletes you're finding out, or is it less or more, or is it not really measurable?
I don't know that much, to be fair. I mean, I know a fair number of them that are, and I know several of them that aren't. So, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is on their end.
Yeah.
I truly don't know the percentages on the male end because most of the time I'm ecstatic people are here throwing in this sport, and I'm not too worried about.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd say yes, they are throwers because damn it if they don't kick my ass. So I want to have a real good excuse. Yeah, she dominates me simply because she went to college for 4 years and threw. But that's not the case, I'm sure. It's time in. That's always the case.
I mean, Sarah here. Yeah. I don't think she was a thrower in college. I may be wrong on that, but I mean. Some of the ladies you see, I mean, down at the Arnold, there's several I know who were. I mean, there's a couple that I see in the big contest for the women around, the elite women's categories that are sadly few and far between because a lot of contests won't do that, which is a bummer because those ladies are incredible.
Wait a minute.
There's contests that hold the women's contest, and then there's ones that'll carry ones pretty much alongside, similar to a pro comp, but for the women's, and it's only pretty much top 10 level women who end up showing up.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's the women who are in the top.
It's not an exclusion. I thought you were going to say it was an exclusion thing for women. That's a weird day and age we live in to hear that.
There's women's contests.
Yeah, gotcha.
There's some that really focus on bringing in the really, really high end contests.
I gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things. That's one of the things Sarah tried to work on was bringing in some of the really high end level ladies.
Well, she did. I felt she did. Yeah.
She did with women like Emily coming in, and sadly Sarah couldn't compete. But Sarah's usually one of the.
No, why couldn't you compete, Sarah? Because you thought you were a strong woman the day you wanted to carry farmers in the grass, uneven grass and surface, might I add, and you broke your leg or broke your ankle. So I think she's back, though. I think she's close.
She's walking without the boot.
Yeah.
Now, so she's coming back, which is good. She did end up, doing some serious damage to her foot there, which was a bummer. But bringing in the team that she did, I mean, that was
impressive.
A heck of a show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I tell you,
show.
my first show back in 13 years, I was like, wow, this is a place to be right now. This is really cool to see all this happening between you and Cam, and of course the pro. I can't remember the guy that I competed against. That was he should have been a pro guy. I don't know. I can't remember his name. Scott, I think his name was, or something.
Are you talking Zach?
Might have been Zach. Yeah, well built guy, about 210 pounds.
200. I think Zach's more than that.
Yeah. What's just amazing.
Zach Riley's in the Masters division.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think he was out there on Saturday. He might have been out there with the pros, but he can throw with them. But he's just an incredible thrower.
It could have been him. I can't. I apologize. I can't remember.
He's a hammer thrower too.
Well, anyhow, the guy was just amazing to watch. So yeah, it's really cool to see that the disparity between athletes. It's never really something any of us do other than just stand in awe. And we're not. It's not a depressing moment. You're just like, wow, there's just so much room for this sport to get better at it. Mm-hmm. To be able to, if I can just translate some of my strength with some technique, I mean, I feel like I could even be more competitive. But yeah, it was a great show to be a part of, and Sarah did a great job. Of course, she's big in Michigan. I think she runs the Michigan Highlanders Association, right? Is that?
There's a group of them that do that.
Okay.
Her, Jeff Patton, who holds a lot of our gear.
Okay.
He brings a lot of the gear to the games, and without him, a lot of it would never happen because
we're pretty lucky around here.
He's the one bringing the weights. He's bringing the height
yeah.
standards.
Oh yeah, you're right. No, he's a great guy.
He's bringing all of that.
That's a lot of work
and
too.
And then him and Sarah handles a lot of the registration, things like that. And with the Michigan Highlanders, she runs that really well.
Are we pretty blessed in this state to have so many opportunities to compete? Is it a normal thing? We've got quite a few shows.
We have a lot. We have a fair number compared to a lot of places.
Yeah.
Compared to most and part of that is because we have the Michigan Highlanders group, I feel.
Right.
Because in a lot of cases, they're run individually by festivals.
Oh, I see. Which can be kind of messy then, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So because we have the Michigan Highlanders, you can get half a dozen in, all run through the same group and not have to worry about it.
Right.
And then there's still others in Michigan that are run by other individuals.
Gotcha.
So Detroit is run by, Kurt Pauly, and he does it on his realm. The Renaissance Festival is run by Frank Stazza, who runs both of those, and he does the announcing at Detroit too. But he's involved. Kate Bovey over on the other side of the state on the west side of the state, she runs a couple that always get huge turnouts, which is awesome.
Yeah.
She's got
Kalamazoo this weekend.
Kalamazoo is Kalamazoo's in September.
Oh, September. Okay.
This weekend is the first of the two Michigan Renaissance Festival contests.
Oh, that's right. I had talked to you about that. I wanted to go. I so wish I could. I've always wanted to compete. How is it competing there?
That one's fun. It's interesting. It's not a sanctioned event, so you won't get any near numbers put into NASGA. But
the crowd is just great, though, isn't it?
It's fun. Yeah. It's a lot smaller field, so you won't throw hammers, you won't throw lightweight.
Right.
But it's a fun crowd, without a doubt. There's definitely, especially by the end of the day, because he always saves weight over bar till the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the weight over bar is like across the path from one of the little beer vendors.
Yeah.
So there's always so many people, they come out of the line and they just stop and stare. Because
they do. Yeah, I reached out to Frank. I wanted to try to get into that amateur on. I thought it was Sunday. It was Saturday. Hey, Frank, I didn't know they didn't have hammer in there and stuff, man. Listen, I'm just saying, I'm not a pro guy, but they can beat up on me. I'm not bad at weight over bar. I'm not bad at sheaf. I mean, I'm just saying, Frank, maybe slide me in for fun. That's my plea to try to get to the Highland Games on Sunday if I can. In any case, I think it's really cool that we have this really cool camaraderie throughout the state. I think it's a shout out to Sarah and Steve Blivens. Obviously, they're super close to me, and I enjoy the heck out of them. They've taken me under their wing as their adopted son. I guess I shouldn't say that. I'm older than both of them, but in any case, I love Sarah and I love Steve. Steve is my mentor to some degree. Mm-hmm. I had a bad arm that last show, but I was in a position to just kick his ass too. Mm-hmm. I'm coming for you, Steve. I'm coming for you. But I think it's really cool how we've got this. That I've noticed this real sort of camaraderie throughout the state, because really there is nobody trying to do this or that. It's everybody kind of collectively working together to make sure these contests, of course, have a big enough field to be able to entertain.
Yeah. And I mean, along with that, going back to the Michigan Highlanders, I mean, they've got a bigger team with guys like Marty Porco helping out with some of the ones on the west side of the state for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
He's been a guy who's, he's been around for a couple of years, for nearly. I mean, he's been around as long as been in the sport. I know for sure, and I mean, he's one of those guys that you'll show up for games, and he's always a good time to be around. He's always a fun guy to be around too, and with that, I mean, he helps organize a lot of, he helps put together a lot of helps with a lot of the stuff for the Michigan Highlanders as a piece there too. So I mean, those three pretty much make up a lot of what's going on with the Michigan Highlanders group. But with the growth of this, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, listen, I'm so proud to be a part of it, and so honored to be able to work out and train with you guys and everybody else that I've met. That I'm looking forward to. Hey, I got my calendar going right now. I'm already looking at trying to get everywhere I can before the snow starts flying, and then I already talking to a few people that are going to be throwing stuff down south of us that we can get in a bit later of a season, which will be fun. And
Indianapolis is always one that a lot of the Michigan guys go down to for the last one of the year.
Oh yeah, I think
because that's October, I believe. First weekend in October or something like that.
Who throws that show?
Oh, I do not know. Sadly, I haven't been to that show since my first year.
I think I got wind of that show. That was a good one to go to. So
that's usually a really good show.
Okay.
That's usually a fun one.
Yeah.
Usually brings in a fair number of athletes because it's towards when you're talking the northern states up here, it becomes one of the later events.
Yeah.
For something in October, and because most of ours in Michigan, our last two I think are Kalamazoo and then the Michigan Renaissance Festival in September because they have a second one in September, and those are the last two here in Michigan, and then you have to start looking at stuff out of state.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then I think there's one in Ohio in later down in the fall, and then there's another one in Indianapolis.
And I guess if you wanted to follow the weather, you just keep going south. You're always going to run into one. Yeah, that's what's cool about it.
I mean, there's games in Florida in January.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Hey, that sounds great to me. Good reason to go to Florida. Of course, I'll be down there for OSG in November. If my weekend's cut short for any reason, maybe I'll find a Highlands Games. But in any case, Eric, I want to thank you for joining me today, man. It's been meaning to get you in here. You're a pro in the making, as far as I'm concerned. You're already there. We just need to make it official eventually.
We'll see. I got a big one coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and if you guys ever get a chance to come to some of these Highland Games festivals out there, no matter where you're at, it's a spectacle. It's fun to be a part of. The pageantry of it is always amazing. And if you don't like bagpipes, then just get the fuck out because everybody loves bagpipes, right? So, yeah, I appreciate you joining me, man. Good luck. And you're going to the Highland Games Renaissance this weekend, or you're not going to go?
I'm going to a Renaissance, but not this one.
Oh, you are?
I'm going to the Amateur Championship in Minnesota.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, see, and I thought that's where you were going to get your pro card.
Yep. But there's no specifics on that one, but that one's one that I've been hoping to qualify for a couple of years now.
Okay.
And we have one hell of a lineup of guys.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. So, yeah, let's go over that real quick. You've got top 10 basically in the nation, right?
Pretty much. They're that level. All of our guys are guys who would be in the top 20 in all of North America.
Right.
At the level we're throwing, so it's a bunch of guys.
It's a resume builder. You get to the top of that list.
Within the next couple of years, some guys, I think one of them even has a chance to turn pro this year.
Wow.
So he's going to throw this one, and I think, within the next couple of months, he's going to throw a pro show. So there's no doubt that, this group, there's a fair number of guys who could in the future end up turning pro.
It's a great barometer for you is what you're saying.
Yeah, and this contest has even had guys come over from, Scotland and stuff like that. Guys like, Kyle Randalls, who's gone on to throw at the Braemar Gathering. He threw at this show a couple times. So it's definitely a big one, but it's the Minnesota Renaissance Festival.
Nice.
So that's the next one.
Yeah, nice. Well, hey, man, good luck in that. I don't think you need it. I think you're a great thrower. I think if you have the day that I know you're capable of having, we'll be having another conversation with you. Come back over a couple beers. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right, man.